From rock bottom to Iron Man. If you think success is a straight line, then the life of Robert Downey Jr. will completely destroy that illusion. His story is not just about fame or money, it's about falling to the lowest point possible and still finding a way to rise again. This is a journey filled with talent, chaos, addiction, failure, and one of the greatest comebacks in Hollywood history. Today, most people recognize him as the genius billionaire Tony Stark from the Marvel Universe. But what many don't realize is that before becoming Iron Man, he was fighting his own real-life battles: addiction, arrests, career collapse, and public humiliation. At one point, studios refused to hire him, insurance companies rejected him, and people believed his career was permanently over. But here's what makes this story powerful: he didn't stay down. He rebuilt himself step by step, proving that your past does not have to define your future. His life is a perfect example of resilience, discipline, and transformation. In this video, you're going to see the full journey, from a troubled childhood to global superstardom, from addiction to redemption. By the end, you won't just know his story, you'll understand what it really takes to rebuild your life from zero. Childhood, talent born in chaos. Robert Downey Jr. was born on April 4, 1965, in New York City, into a family deeply connected to the film industry. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was an experimental filmmaker, and his mother, Elsie Ann Ford, was an actress. So from the very beginning, acting wasn't something he chose later, it was literally the environment he grew up in. He made his first on-screen appearance at just 5 years old in one of his father's films. That might sound impressive, but behind the scenes, his childhood was far from ideal. His home life was unstable, filled with exposure to adult behaviors at a very young age. Instead of a normal, structured upbringing, he was surrounded by chaos, artistic freedom, and a lack of boundaries. One of the most disturbing parts of his childhood was his early exposure to drugs. His father, who himself struggled with addiction, introduced Robert to drugs at a shockingly young age. This wasn't just a bad influence, it planted the seeds for the addiction that would later almost destroy his life. Scientifically speaking, early exposure to substances significantly increases the risk of long-term dependency, and Robert became a real-life example of this. Despite all this, one thing was clear: he had raw talent. Acting came naturally to him. But talent alone is never enough. Without discipline, structure, and a healthy environment, even the most gifted individuals can spiral out of control. And that's exactly what started happening as he grew older. Teenage years and early career, fame begins, discipline doesn't. As Robert grew into his teenage years, his life started shifting between two extremes: growing recognition as a talented actor and increasing personal instability. After his parents divorced, he moved to Los Angeles with his father, which placed him even deeper into the entertainment world. This move wasn't just geographical, it was a transition into a faster, more competitive, and more chaotic lifestyle. During the 1980s, he began building his acting career seriously. He became part of a group of young actors known as the Brat Pack, appearing in films and gaining attention for his charisma and screen presence. His performances stood out because he had something rare: a mix of intelligence, unpredictability, and natural charm. He wasn't just acting, he was expressing. However, while his career was moving upward, his personal life was heading in the opposite direction. The lack of discipline from his childhood continued into adulthood. He dropped out of school and fully committed to acting, but without any structure or control over his habits. The same early exposure to drugs started turning into regular use, slowly becoming dependency. This is where a critical pattern begins: success without self-control often leads to self-destruction. Robert had the talent to become one of the greatest actors of his generation, but he was also building habits that would soon start destroying everything he was achieving. Rising star, talent at its peak, life out of control. As the late 1980s and early 1990s arrived, Robert Downey Jr. was no longer just a promising actor. He was becoming one of the most respected talents in Hollywood. His breakthrough came with the film Chaplin, where he played the legendary comedian Charlie Chaplin. His performance was so precise and powerful that it earned him an Academy Award nomination. At this point, he had proven something very few actors can: pure, undeniable skill. Critics loved him. Audiences noticed him. Industry insiders saw him as a future legend. He had everything: fame, recognition, and opportunities. From a logical perspective, this was the phase where he should have built a stable, long-term career. But reality doesn't always follow logic, especially when internal issues are ignored. Behind the scenes, his addiction was getting worse. Substance abuse was no longer occasional, it had become a daily part of his life. Scientifically, addiction rewires the brain's reward system, making destructive habits feel necessary. And in Robert's case, even massive success couldn't compete with that chemical dependency. This created a dangerous contradiction: on-screen brilliance and off-screen chaos. Directors started seeing him as unreliable. Projects became risky. The same industry that once admired him began questioning whether he was worth the trouble. This is a brutal truth of real life: talent can open doors, but behavior decides how long those doors stay open. Downfall, addiction, arrests, and total collapse. By the mid to late 1990s, everything that Robert Downey Jr. had built started falling apart, fast. His addiction was no longer hidden or manageable, it became public, uncontrollable, and destructive. What began as substance use in his early years had now turned into full-blown dependency, affecting every aspect of his life, career, relationships, and basic stability. In 1996, he was arrested for possession of drugs and a firearm. This wasn't a one-time mistake, it became a pattern. Over the next few years, he faced multiple arrests, court cases, and legal troubles. He even violated probation several times, which eventually led to jail time. At one point, he was sentenced to prison and sent to the California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. From a rational perspective, this is what happens when addiction overrides decision-making. The brain prioritizes short-term relief over long-term consequences. Even when the risks are obvious: career destruction, jail, public shame, the addicted mind keeps repeating the same behavior. Robert became a textbook case of how talent alone cannot protect you from self-destruction. Hollywood, being a business-driven industry, responded logically. Studios stopped hiring him. Insurance companies refused to cover him, which made it nearly impossible for producers to cast him. He was fired from projects, lost contracts, and became labeled as unreliable. At this stage, his career wasn't just declining, it was practically dead. Imagine this: a man once nominated for an Oscar, now sitting in jail, with no work, no trust, and no clear future. This is what rock bottom actually looks like: not just failure, but complete loss of direction and credibility. Turning point: the decision to change. After hitting rock bottom, something critical shifted in Robert Downey Jr.'s life, not suddenly, not magically, but gradually. Change didn't come from motivation or inspiration, it came from necessity. When a person loses everything: career, reputation, freedom, the brain is forced to reevaluate survival itself. For Robert, continuing the same path simply wasn't an option anymore. One of the biggest influences during this phase was his relationship with Susan Downey, whom he later married. She played a key role in creating a stable environment around him, but she also set clear boundaries. This is important: real support is not blind support. It includes accountability. Along with this, he began therapy, rehabilitation programs, and lifestyle changes that targeted both the physical and psychological aspects of addiction. He also explored practices like meditation, martial arts, and structured routines. Scientifically, these help rewire the brain by replacing destructive habits with controlled, repeatable behaviors. Recovery isn't about removing addiction instantly. It's about building systems that make relapse less likely over time. Robert started doing exactly that. Another key factor was consistency. Many people try to change, but they fail because they expect quick results. Robert's recovery took years, not weeks. He had relapses, setbacks, and doubts, but he kept moving forward. That's the difference: not perfection, but persistence. This phase wasn't glamorous. There were no headlines praising him yet. No major film offers. Just a man rebuilding his life step by step, away from the spotlight. The comeback, a risk that changed everything. After years of struggle and rebuilding, Robert Downey Jr. slowly started getting small opportunities again. But Hollywood wasn't ready to fully trust him yet. From a business perspective, hiring him was risky. His past made insurance difficult, and producers feared delays or controversies. So instead of big roles, he began with smaller projects, proving one thing consistently: he had change. One of his early comeback moments came with the TV show Ally McBeal, where his performance was so good that he even won a Golden Globe. This showed the industry that his talent was still intact. But his personal issues hadn't fully disappeared yet, and he faced setbacks again. This phase highlights a brutal reality: progress is not always linear. Even when you improve, the past can still pull you back. The real turning point came when director Jon Favreau decided to take a massive gamble on him. He cast Robert as Tony Stark in the movie Iron Man. At that time, this decision was considered extremely risky. Many people in the industry doubted it, but Favreau saw something others ignored. Robert wasn't just acting as Tony Stark, he was Tony Stark in real life. Flawed, genius, and rebuilding himself. When Iron Man released in 2008, everything changed overnight. The movie was a massive success, both critically and commercially. Robert didn't just return, he dominated. This wasn't luck, it was preparation meeting opportunity. Years of rebuilding, discipline, and persistence finally paid off at the highest level. Global domination, becoming Iron Man forever. After the success of Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. didn't just make a comeback. He became one of the most powerful actors in the world. The film launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and his character Tony Stark became the foundation of this entire universe. This wasn't just another role, it was a cultural shift that changed how blockbuster films were made. Movie after movie, he delivered consistent performances that connected with millions of people globally. From Iron Man sequels to the Avengers, he became the face of Marvel. His screen presence, humor, and emotional depth made Tony Stark one of the most loved characters in cinema history. Scientifically speaking, this is what happens when personality and role align perfectly. Authenticity increases audience connection. Financially, this phase was insane. He became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, earning hundreds of millions of dollars through contracts, back-end deals, and bonuses. But more importantly, he rebuilt something even more valuable than money: trust. The same industry that once rejected him now depended on him to lead billion-dollar franchises. This stage of his life proves a powerful principle: your past doesn't limit your future if you can rebuild your credibility. Robert didn't just recover, he reached a level that most actors never achieve. Legacy, more than just a comeback. By the time Robert Downey Jr. stepped away from his role as Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, he had already secured his place in cinematic history. But his legacy is not just about box office numbers or superhero fame, it's about transformation. He went from being one of Hollywood's biggest liabilities to one of its most reliable and valuable assets. That kind of shift is extremely rare and requires not just talent, but deep internal change. On a personal level, he rebuilt his life with stability, discipline, and long-term thinking. His marriage, family life, and structured routine became the foundation that kept him grounded. This reflects a key real-world principle: success is sustainable only when your personal system is stable. Without that, even the biggest achievements collapse over time. He also became a symbol of second chances. His story is often used as a case study in psychology and behavioral change: how environment, habits, and consistent effort can rewire a person's trajectory. Instead of being remembered for his failures, he redefined himself through action. That's a powerful lesson. Identity is not fixed, it evolves based on what you repeatedly do. Today, Robert Downey Jr. is not just an actor, he is proof that even after complete failure, a person can rebuild and reach the top again. His journey is not about luck or destiny, it's about decisions, discipline, and persistence over time. The real lesson behind the story: the life of Robert Downey Jr. is not just a celebrity story, it's a real-life case study of human behavior. It shows how talent alone is useless without discipline, and how poor habits can destroy even the most gifted individuals. At the same time, it proves that change is possible if actions are repeated consistently over time. This is not motivation, this is psychology and reality working together. If you break his journey logically, it follows a clear pattern: early exposure, right pointing arrow; lack of control, right pointing arrow; addiction, right pointing arrow; collapse, right pointing arrow; structured recovery, right pointing arrow; disciplined action, right pointing arrow; massive success. This pattern is not unique to him, it applies to anyone. The only difference is whether a person recognizes their situation early and decides to change before hitting rock bottom. The biggest takeaway is simple but powerful: your past does not define your future, but your daily actions do. Robert didn't magically become successful again, he built systems, followed routines, and stayed consistent even when no one was watching. That's the part most people ignore because it's not glamorous, but it's the only thing that actually works. So if there's one thing you should take from this story, it's this: success is not about where you start, it's about how you respond when everything goes wrong. And if someone can fall as hard as Robert Downey Jr. and still rise to the top, then logically, rebuilding is always possible, if you're willing to do the work.